The wait is finally over. The 2024 NFL season is here. In this video, we are going to be diving into everything about the 2024 NFL season, record predictions, award predictions, and a full playoff bracket. Going to go division by division, starting here with the AFC East, where we're going to be predicting each team's record. Starting with the Miami Dolphins, I have them going 10-7, the Bills at 10-7, the Jets at 9-8, and the Patriots at 4-13. I think the top three teams in this division, the Dolphins, Bills, and Jets, are all very close in terms of talent, their expectations for this year, and where they hope to finish. For the Dolphins, I do have them ultimately winning this division for the first time since 2008. For them, I do think they have fantastic playmakers, both at the wide receiver and running back position. You have Tyreek Hill, who was the best player in football last year. I think that Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle are the best 1-2 duo in the NFL. And then I also think that they have a lot of good playmakers in that backfield. Devon Achane, Raheem Mostert. Tua does enough in that offense to really take advantage of the playmakers. I do think there are concerns about their offensive line, their defense, especially with Chubb and Jalen Phillips' health. But I think overall this team is really good. I think Mike McDaniel is a fantastic coach, and I do think they have a great chance to win the AFC East this year. The Bills I have at 10-7 as well. I really think this is going to come down to the heroics of Josh Allen. I don't think the Bills are a particularly talented roster anymore. Trade away Stephon Diggs, you lose Matt Milano due to injury. I think they've gone through a lot of change over the past couple of years, especially this offseason, losing some key pieces. Really, it's going to fall on the shoulders of Josh Allen to be a superhuman, special quarterback. And I do think he is that good, to the point that he does get the Bills back into the playoff picture at 10-7. Definitely have them at least competing for that spot, when I think without him, this Bills team would be in a really bad place. Then the Jets at 9-8. This team is uber talented. On paper, they have one of the best rosters in the entire NFL. A lot of this is going to come down to the health and the play of Aaron Rodgers. This team was pretty decent last year, even with Zach Wilson as their quarterback. If they can get good quarterback play out of Aaron Rodgers, this team could absolutely win the division, make a run to the playoffs, get back into that mix for the first time since 2010 when they went to the AFC Championship game. I think this Robert Saleh-led defense is one of the best in the entire NFL. Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, both fantastic playmakers. Aaron Rodgers just has to stay healthy and take advantage. I think overall, this Jets team may hit a few bumps in the road, but I ultimately do have them finishing 9-8 this season. And then the Patriots dead last at 4-13. Drake May is the future of this team. It's a transition away from Bill Belichick, their first time without him since 2000. So it definitely will be a bit of a transition season. I don't think May is going to play a whole lot in the early parts of this season. I think there is a lack of talent on this roster as well. And ultimately, I have them going 4-13. I don't think that's too surprising to many Patriots fans. Then we have, in my opinion, the best division in all of football, the AFC North. I have the Bengals finishing 12-5, the Ravens at 11-6, the Browns at 9-8, and then the Steelers at 8-9. Could absolutely see all of these teams making the playoffs, being in consideration to the very last day of being able to make the playoffs and put themselves in a really good position to be a successful team this year. I ultimately did go with the Bengals winning the division. They did have an incredibly difficult schedule last year, one of the statistically most difficult schedules in recent memory. They had a hobbled Joe Burrow for the first half of the season and then Jake Browning for the second half of the season, and they still managed to win 9 games. So I think this is still one of the most talented rosters in the NFL. Obviously, they had some bad luck go against them last year, but assuming Joe Burrow and some of their key players can stay healthy, I think this team is in for a rebound season. I definitely think that they will be looking to get back to the playoffs, back to the Super Bowl. They also have the easiest schedule in this division, as they were playing a 4th place schedule this upcoming season. So I do think the Bengals will be in a prime position to take back the AFC North this year. The Ravens up next at 11-6. I do think that there are a few questions about this defense, especially after losing Mike Macdonald. They were fantastic last year, but obviously it's just going to be a bit different with him now as the head coach in Seattle. He was one of the best young defensive minds in the entire NFL, so I think there are questions about can they repeat that level of success. I also think the offensive line is a bit of a question mark. and some of the playmakers on this team as well. Lamar Jackson will need to have another MVP caliber season for this Ravens team to be a really competitive team. I absolutely think he can do that. I have them at 11-6 this year, finishing second in the AFC North. The Browns at number 3, one of the most talented rosters on paper, but they just seemingly have struggled to put everything together. Last year they had an insanely good defense, one of the best defenses in the NFL. The offense really struggled. Deshaun Watson looked like a replacement level quarterback. He was outplayed by 40-year-old Joe Flacco, who they called off the streets. I think overall this Browns team is going to struggle at the quarterback position. Offensively, you don't have Nick Chubb likely for the early half of this season, or he won't at least be the Nick Chubb that we all know and love. I think this passing game will struggle a little bit with Watson at the helm. You lose Bill Callahan, one of the best position coaches in the NFL. I do think there are just some question marks about this Browns team, and ultimately they have loads of talent and they can well exceed this ranking, but I do think that they just need to prove that they can put everything together here. And then the Steelers at number 4, this would be Mike Tomlin's first losing season ever as a head coach. You don't really want to bet that that happens. I will say, though, I do have a little lack of faith in this offense. I think Russell Wilson just is not a particularly great quarterback anymore. I think Justin Fields is super inconsistent if they turn that way. The playmakers really scare me outside of George Pickens. I don't think there's a lot there. I think you're really relying a lot, once again, on this defense being a superstar unit. And it absolutely can be. I could absolutely see them winning 10 games. But I think maybe this year is just the year that things catch up to them a little bit. They go 8-9. Still a decent season, but I think that there is a chance that they'll be in the playoff hunt toward the very last day, but also a chance that they drop just below 500 here at 8-9. A very intriguing division up next, the AFC South. All of these teams with young quarterbacks that I think are still ascending. And number 1, I have the Texans going 11-6. CJ Stroud proved to be an amazing quarterback in his rookie season. All they did was surround him with more weapons this year. Stephon Diggs, you get another year of Tank Dell, Nico Collins. You've got incredible playmakers on that offense. Defense, led by DeMeco Ryans, one of the best young defensive minds in the entire NFL. I really like this Texans team. I do think they're going to be competitive in the AFC. I think that there might be a little bit more inconsistencies with Stroud now that defenses potentially have a little bit more film on him and opportunities to counter some of what he does. But I think ultimately he is just a really poised, accurate quarterback that's going to take advantage of what the defense gives him. I think he's going to be in for another really good year, maybe an MVP caliber season, and lead this Texans team to an AFC South title. Then for the Jaguars, I still have them at 9-8. I think a lot of people are forgetting how good Trevor Lawrence is just because of how he finished last year when he was fighting through an injury. He didn't look particularly good during that time frame, but I think overall he is still a really good quarterback. I think he's still ascending. I think overall, you've got some nice players on defense that you can turn to. I think the offense maybe isn't amazing, but they are explosive. I think that this could be a very fun, inconsistent team to watch, but overall still a lot of talent on this Jaguars roster. The Colts, I think, are a very polarizing team this year because they have maybe the most polarizing player in the entire NFL and Anthony Richardson at the most important position in the league. I think Richardson has shown a lot of inconsistencies both last year in the 4 or 5 games that he played and this preseason as well. He's had incredible high-end moments. He's also had moments of really bad inaccuracy. He's also dealt with a ton of major injuries. So I think overall this running game is going to be really good with Jonathan Taylor, Anthony Richardson as a runner, good offensive line in front of him. I do think that the defense is decent. The secondary is definitely a big-time question mark, but I think the Colts will be in playoff contention, maybe just a year too early, and a lot of this will just depend on the consistency and the health of Anthony Richardson. He's just a big-time wild card. It could go in a variety of different directions. Then for the Titans, I have them at 5-12. I do think that they are doing a good job putting talent around Will Levis to see what he is. I think he can be a franchise-level quarterback. I do think he's really talented, but he's got to show it. They surround him with some high-floor weapons. They bring in a new head coach in Brian Callahan. I think that overall this team definitely has a ton of question marks on the offensive line. I think in the running game, there's big-time question marks after losing Derrick Henry. The defense still has some missing pieces as well, but maybe a year too early, but I think the Titans will still be competitive. They'll be a team that is headed in the right direction. And I think may just struggle a bit to put up consistent wins. I have them at 5-12 here. And then in the AFC West, I think the Chiefs will cruise to another AFC West title. I don't think this division is very good at all outside of the Chiefs. I think they'll finish at 13-4, the Chargers at 7-10, and the Raiders and Broncos at 6-11. Once again, Chiefs back-to-back Super Bowl champions. I think they will easily make it back to the playoffs and have a chance to three-peat. Behind them, you have the Chargers. I have them at 7-10. I think Herbert is dealing with some injuries. They've got a true lack of playmakers. Lad McConkey and Quentin Johnston, Trey Palmer. Those are pretty much the only guys right now on this wide receiver unit, and they are far from a proven commodity. I think the running game, you've got injury-prone running backs. This team has some talent, and I think the Harbaugh hiring is going to be a good one, but it might take some time for him to really implement his culture and kind of bring in the talent that really fits what he wants to do. The Raiders definitely have some stars. You've got Devontae Adams, you've got Max Crosby. But I think overall, starting Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell with a questionable offensive line and definitely some question marks in the secondary as well. I do think that even though I like Antonio Pierce and what he's building, I think this Raiders team is a while away from really truly being competitive. They need a quarterback of the future. I don't think Minshew or Aiden O'Connell are really going to give you very high-end quarterback play this year. And then for the Broncos, I have them at 6-11 as well. Sean Payton definitely wanted Bo Nix. We'll see how he is in his offense as a rookie. I think there are question marks. I wasn't the biggest Bo Nix fan, but I do think he will operate Sean Payton's offense pretty effectively. There's just a lack of playmakers for him, especially at the wide receiver position. Big time question marks on the defense as well. So I don't think this Broncos team is talented enough to really hang with a lot of these other really good teams in the AFC. And ultimately, I do think they might be a year away from Sean Payton really being able to put the talent around Bo Nix to really help him be super successful. Looking at the NFC East next, I have the Cowboys at 11-6, Eagles at 10-7, the Commanders at 5-12, and the Giants at 4-13. The Cowboys winning this division back-to-back would be the first time this happens in the NFC East since the Eagles did it back in 2003 and 2004. It's been a lot of switching of who wins this division back and forth between these teams. I ultimately do think the Cowboys are in the best spot to potentially do that this year. You get the deal done with CeeDee Lamb. I think Dak Prescott has shown he is just an incredibly cerebral passer, has great accuracy, can really understand where to attack the defense. Obviously, there's plenty of questions once he gets to the playoffs, how this team operates, but I think overall this Cowboys team has a ton of talent on the offensive side of the ball. The offensive line is still really, really good. There's definitely question marks in the running game. Your defense is still really talented. Even after losing Dan Quinn, I do think the Cowboys have a good chance of repeating as NFC East champions. The Eagles are 10-7 here. Definitely a very talented team as well. You've got Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, great offensive line, even though they did lose Jason Kelce. I do think that I just have some question marks about Nick Sirianni being able to really be a strong offensive mind, being able to set a good culture for this team. On paper, this roster is really, really talented. I do think they will definitely make the playoffs in a pretty rough NFC, but I do think that I do have a few more question marks on the Eagles than I do for some other teams. The Commanders I have at 5-12. Jaden Daniels is going to be a really interesting rookie with his dual threat ability, but I have big time question marks on pretty much the entire roster around him. I think that Cliff Kingsbury running this offense is a questionable decision. I think he has probably the worst offensive line in the NFL in front of him. You no longer have Jahan Dotson. It's just pretty much Terry McLaurin as your true weapon there. Then I think this defense is a mess as well. So I think this Commanders team has a lot of work to do. Jaden Daniels is going to have to stay healthy. Otherwise, I think they might be one of the worst teams in the entire NFL. And then I have the Giants at number 4 in this division, 4-13. I really like Brian Daboll, but I just don't believe in Daniel Jones. I don't believe in this offensive line, this defense. I just don't think that this team is really equipped with the talent on this roster to be super competitive this year. I wouldn't fire Brian Daboll because I think he's a great coach, but I wouldn't be surprised if he does lose his job after this year just because I don't think the talent on this roster is good enough for this Giants team to be competing. Moving to the NFC North, I think this division features 2 of the 3 best teams in the entire NFC. I have the Packers going 12-5, the Lions at 11-6, the Bears at 9-8, and the Vikings at 6-11. Starting with the Packers, I think that this is just an incredibly talented team. I think Jordan Love picks up where he left off in the playoffs last year and the backstretch of last season, where he was arguably a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. He's got so many young, talented weapons that he's really building a rapport with. Their offensive line is really good in pass protection. The defense, with a new defensive coordinator and Halfley in there instead of Joe Barry, who was atrocious for this team. I really think this Packers team could be very, very dangerous. I have them at 12-5. And then the Lions right there behind him, bringing back their entire coaching staff. Getting Ben Johnson, one of the best young minds in the NFL, back, I think is excellent for this team. You have a lot of continuity. I think the roster is in fantastic shape, great culture. Aiden Hutchinson leading that defense. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, a great offensive line. Jared Goff playing the best football of his entire career, and a really good defense as well. I think that this Lions team is definitely poised for a big season. I just think that, they're in a pretty tough division, probably the second best division in the entire NFL, and they do play a first-place schedule after winning the division last year, so they do just have a little bit tougher schedule than, say, the Packers. Then I've got the Bears at 9-8. I think they do start a little bit slow, but Caleb Williams really kind of starts to figure things out down the stretch as he finds his form. He's got an amazing trio of wide receivers: DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze. I think the defense is well coached with Matt Eberflus. They still have some holes on this team. I do think that they'll maybe be in the playoff mix at the very end of the year. I still think they're a year away from really, truly being a threat in the NFC, but I do absolutely think they'll be a lot of fun to watch this year. Then I have the Vikings at number 4. Obviously, the loss of J.J. McCarthy is a tough one. I believe in Kevin O'Connell a lot, but I can't say I'm a huge believer in Sam Darnold to be a competent NFL quarterback. You've got good weapons on this team. Obviously, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, T.J. Hawkinson when he's healthy, Aaron Jones you bring in. I do think the defense is going to be a lot worse this year. I think Flores is a great defensive coordinator, but there is a lack of talent on that roster, and I think that offense has kind of figured out a lot of the blitz or drop 8 kind of thing that Flores was doing last year. So I think he's going to have to put a new spin on this defense. I think that the Vikings just lack a little bit of upside with a pretty poor quarterback option this year and do falter a little bit in a tough division at 6-11. Next up, the NFC South, easily the worst division in all of football. I do have the Falcons winning this at 9-8, the Buccaneers at 8-9, the Saints at 6-11, and the Panthers at 5-12. I don't think any of these teams are really going to be competing for anything this year. I think the Falcons definitely are probably the most talented team, bringing in Kirk Cousins. He is coming off a major injury at 36, but I think he gives a much higher floor for this Falcons team, coming from Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke and some of the horrible quarterback play that they had before. Kirk Cousins will be a massive upgrade over that. And then I think you've got some good weapons in Pitts and Bijan Robinson. I do think this team will ultimately win this division and honestly be pretty good offensively. I do question some of their defense, but you bring in some talent. You have Jesse Bates there. You bring in Justin Simmons. I think the defensive line is a bit of a question mark for sure, but ultimately this Falcons offense is enough to propel them to first place in this really, really bad division. The Buccaneers at 8-9. They were a playoff team last year. They actually won a playoff game as well. I just don't see that happening. I think that the loss of Dave Canales to their division rival, the Panthers, is going to be felt hard. I think the offense takes a little bit of a step back. I think Baker takes a little bit of a step back as well. And, ultimately the Buccaneers did good in the playoffs, but I don't think they were that great of a team last year. I think they benefited from being in a really, really poor division, and they get pretty close to the same mark at 8-9 that they were at last year, but ultimately can't make the playoffs as the Falcons win this division. The Saints I have at 6-11. I think Dennis Allen is going to be the first head coach fired. I think they get off to a slow start, maybe finish a little bit stronger under an interim coach, but I got to say, I just don't believe in this Saints team. I think Derek Carr is a below-average quarterback. I don't think they have a good offensive line. This defense is old. They're dealing with major salary cap issues, and that prevents a lot of young, talented depth on this roster. So I just don't believe a lot in this Saints team. Then the Panthers, I think, will be much more competitive this year. I think they'll be much more functional, and Bryce Young will look like a half-decent young quarterback. But I do think there is a major lack of talent on this roster. I still think the weapons, while massively improved, are still not great in this league. So overall, I think the Panthers struggle a bit. They finish 5-12, but things do look much better than they did last year. Then in the NFC West, I have the 49ers going 13-4, winning the division, the Rams at 9-8, the Cardinals at 9-8, and then the Seahawks at 7-10. 49ers are an easy one. I think they're the most talented team in the NFC. You've got one of the best head coaches in the NFL. You've got the best running back in the NFL. I think Brock Purdy's extremely underrated. Amazing weapons around him as well, bringing back Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey. This is such a talented offense. The defense is incredible as well, led by Nick Bosa. I think this 49ers team is a shoo-in to win this NFC West for the most part. The Rams at 9-8, I think they do lack some depth. They have gotten a lot younger over the years, but I do have questions about Matthew Stafford being able to fully stay healthy. I think that they are just a little heavily star-based. You've got Puka Nacua, Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp on offense. I think this defense lacks some talent, especially after losing Aaron Donald. There's just big-time question marks. I believe in Sean McVay. I think this team will be pretty good, but I do have more question marks about them than I do a lot of other teams that I think might be in the playoff picture. The Cardinals at number 3, I have them at 9-8. They are absolutely my breakout prediction this year. I believe in Kyler Murray. I think so much has gone into him being too short and the Call of Duty jokes that people forget how good of a player he is. Back before he was injured, he was playing at an MVP caliber level. You bring in Marvin Harrison Jr., the best wide receiver prospect I've ever watched. Trey McBride's a great young tight end. I think you've got good talent in Michael Wilson, Paris Johnson, Jonah Williams on that offensive line. I think the defense is really young, and that's going to be the issue with this team. I think the offense will be a top 10 offense in the NFL. I believe in James Conner, Trey Benson, the running game. Drew Petzing, I believe in heavily as a offensive coordinator. I think he's going to get a head coaching job after this year. I think overall this team is going to be really, really good, but the defense does hold them back just a little bit to the point that I just have them missing the playoffs. I think they're going to be a very fun team to watch this year, though. Then the Seahawks, I have at 7-10. Tough division, honestly. I do think McDonald was a great hire. I think he's one of the best young ascending defensive minds. They've got some good talent, Byron Murphy, Devon Witherspoon, Tariq Woolen on that side of the ball. But I do think that the offense is just a little bit of a question mark. Geno Smith, is he going to be able to consistently continue to put up really good seasons? I think the running game, the offensive line is just not super consistent as well. I just don't have a great feeling about the Seahawks this year. I think they'll be okay. I think they'll be competitive, but I don't think they're an amazing team this year. And in a tough division, they're just kind of the team that falls a little bit short at 7-10. So that's my record predictions here. Let's take a look at my award predictions now. For MVP, I have Josh Allen. I think that if the Bills are able to make the playoffs, really be competitive in the AFC, it's going to come from Josh Allen just being a superhuman, amazing quarterback. I think that, a lot of people look at his turnover-worthy plays, his interceptions, stuff like that, and they just assume that Josh Allen's just this crazy out-of-control quarterback, but he is genuinely so good. Josh Allen just has so much talent. I think he might be the physically most talented quarterback in NFL history, just from his pure arm strength. His running ability is amazing. I think he's really going to have to carry this Bills offense. With a lack of talent around him, I think he's going to have a lot of rushing yards. They're going to be in games where he's going to have to throw the ball a lot, put the ball in his hands, and put the game on his shoulders a ton. I think Allen is going to come through and be great for this Bills team this year, put up ridiculous numbers. Offensive Player of the Year, I went with Bijan Robinson. I think that this Falcons team is going to have to run the ball a lot. Kirk Cousins coming off a major injury. Robinson is a fantastic running back, the best running back prospect I've ever watched coming out of college. I think that now that Arthur Smith's not in there, I think Zach Robinson is going to pound the rock with Bijan Robinson as a bell cow back behind a really good run-blocking offensive line. I think he is going to put up ridiculous numbers this year and be really, really the catalyst for that Falcons offense. Defensive Player of the Year, I went with the best player on one of the best teams in football this upcoming year, Nick Bosa. He puts up ridiculous sack numbers. You really can pick any of the elite defensive ends, and I think any one of those would be excellent picks for that award. And I think you could certainly consider somebody like Sauce Gardner, stuff like that, but defensive ends typically win this award. I went with Bosa this year after picking Garrett correctly last year. Offensive Rookie of the Year, the favorite is Caleb Williams, and for good reason. I actually think Marvin Harrison Jr. is just going to have too ridiculously good of a season that he is going to win that award. I really do believe in Marvin Harrison and this Cardinals offense this year. I think he's going to put up huge numbers. I think he's going to step in and be a dominant number one wide receiver from day one and win that Offensive Rookie of the Year award. Defensive Rookie of the Year, there's not a ton of options. The first defensive player off the board was picked at pick 15. That was Latu to the Colts. He's actually my pick, though. With the injury of Samson Ebukam, I do think he's going to have to play a lot. I think he was a super polished, technically sound edge rusher. I think he's going to have a lot of opportunities to really go in, rush the quarterback, and be successful. I think he's really polished from day one, going to be an immediate impact for that Colts defense. Comeback player of the year, I went with Joe Burrow. He had season-ending injury. I think he's going to come back, play at an MVP caliber level. You could definitely put Aaron Rodgers here as well, coming back from his injury. I definitely think it could be either one of those guys. Coach of the year, I did go with Matt LaFleur. Usually this is the head coach of a team that's really, really up and coming. They did way better than what was expected of them. Ultimately, I considered putting Jonathan Gannon just because I have the Cardinals being really successful, but almost always that team that wins Coach of the Year, their coach, that team makes the playoffs. They're really good. They maybe win their division. I think that the Cardinals are going to fall a bit short of that. So I went with Matt LaFleur, who I think is going to have a fantastic season. I think he really figured it out with Jordan Love down the stretch this past year, and I ultimately think he wins this award. So this is what the bracket looks like. Based on my record predictions, we have the Chiefs as the 1 seed, Bengals as the 2, Texans as the 3, Dolphins, Ravens, Bills, and then Jets for the AFC. Then for the NFC, we have the 49ers, the Packers, the Cowboys, the Falcons, the Lions, the Eagles, and the Rams. So my predictions for the first round here, I have the Ravens beating the Dolphins. I think that could be a tough game, but ultimately the Ravens just kind of out-physical them. The Dolphins have had some issues in the playoffs. This would be in Miami, but ultimately the Ravens kind of have that playoff experience. I do think Lamar Jackson and company do win that game. I have the Texans over the Bills. This one could be really competitive. I think that ultimately the Texans just have more talent around their star quarterback in C.J. Stroud. They've got more weapons. Josh Allen can only do so much and ultimately does fall to the Texans team here. Then I have the Bengals taking on the Jets and beating them. I do think this Bengals offense versus the Jets defense would be an awesome matchup, but ultimately the Bengals, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase and company do come up on top. Then in the NFC, I have the Lions beating the Falcons. I think the NFC South is going to be the number 4 seed, and they're going to have a really good number 5 seed to play, probably either the Packers or the Lions in my mind. I think that team as the 5 seed is definitely going to win against the 4 seed in this case. I have the Lions beating the Falcons. I have the Cowboys taking on the Eagles in a divisional matchup. Do have the Cowboys getting over the hump a little bit, winning a playoff game, beating their division rival. I think that would be huge for them. Then I have the Packers over the Rams. Like I said, I just think the Packers are a really talented, complete team. I think there's 3 really good teams in the NFC. The Packers, the 49ers, and the Lions. I think they're kind of in a class of their own. Moving on to the AFC Championship then, I have the Chiefs beating the Ravens. Really no reason to pick against the Chiefs in this matchup. They've just been the kings of the AFC for so long now, it feels like. They've made it to the AFC Championship so many years in a row. It would be an Arrowhead. I once again am picking the Chiefs here. Then I have the Bengals beating the Texans. I think this would be a great matchup. I think it would be so much fun to watch. Ultimately, I am just going with the Bengals. They've proven a lot in the playoffs with Joe Burrow. Both the times he's been in the playoffs and been healthy there, they have went on to make it to the AFC Championship game. And I think there absolutely could be a rematch for the 3rd time in 4 years of this Bengals versus Chiefs matchup that is so much fun to watch. Then I have the Lions upsetting the 49ers. I really like the Lions this year. Like I said, the continuity of the staff and the team roster around them as well. I think that they just have a great culture, a great roster. I definitely am in on the Lions this year. Then I have the Packers beating the Cowboys to set up an NFC North, NFC Championship game, which would be so much fun to watch as well. Then for who I have going to the Super Bowl, I do have the Kansas City Chiefs beating the Bengals until somebody can knock off the Chiefs consistently. The Bengals have proven to maybe be the team that can do that, but I just have too much faith in Patrick Mahomes. I think they're going to have every opportunity to three-peat here. And then I have the Lions beating the Packers. I think this would be so much fun to watch. Get a little bit of revenge for the Packers winning this division. I think this would be an awesome NFC Championship game and sets up a Chiefs versus Lions Super Bowl. And I'm picking the Lions this year to win the Super Bowl. Why not? I just think this team is in a great place. Love the culture, love the players, and this coaching staff. And, I'm not going to pick the Chiefs to three-peats, even though, I think it is probably the smart thing to do. I'm going to go with the Lions winning the Super Bowl this year. Let me know, Lions fans, what you think about that prediction. Fans from all teams, let me know what you think about my record prediction for your team. Who do I have too high? Who am I sleeping on? Throw your record predictions for your favorite teams in the comments down below. Love to see what your thoughts are. If you like this kind of content, please hit that subscribe button. While you're down there, hit the like button as well. Both of those things just do so much to support the channel. We're really ramping up for NFL this season. We've got college football scouting coming up as well. You won't want to miss any of that. Thank you so much for watching. I will catch you in the next one.